So this is going to be different. This Keep It Simple podcast is definitely going to be different. There is no script, no agenda, no show notes, no polish. There will be no editing on the backside. It just is what it is, organic in every way. And so how we arrived at where we are is, and you would have gotten this, but last spring I sent over 50 text messages to friends, and I had this idea of bringing the podcast back and looking at 6 rhythms of grace: study, prayer, authentic community, silence, solitude, and service. And I sent that text to like 50 friends and just said, hey, of these, which are you most drawn to? What would you like to talk about? Over 40 people responded with community.
Jeez.
Right. And so on the backside of that, I backed up and said, okay, we don't need to do a podcast about rhythms of grace. We need to do a podcast about community. And so the Keep It Simple podcast, this is episode 1, and it's going to be a lot different. In my life, pretty colorful background, and know a lot of people from a lot of different avenues. The one common thread is their faith, their belief system. But a lot of people from a lot of backgrounds, and I very much look forward to introducing the world to a lot of them and hearing their stories. But obviously, episode 1 has to be
Goodness gracious.
Our relationship, right, goes way back 10th grade, I think, maybe.
Yeah, 10th.
Summer of 10th coming into 11th. Is that right?
That's right.
And we've been together since, in those years, especially those first 5 to 6 years of student ministry in Warner Robins. I got a lot of the accolade or a lot of the credit for what we built, but in reality, it was you and Mindy. You and Mindy are the reason why the movement became what it became. And then not only that, but not only did you all build it, but then what you did was you modeled that leadership for others, right? And so as I think kind of down the list and through the years, I think about Brian Landreth and Caroline Freeman, and even after that, you had Stephen Landreth and Allison Freeman, and you had, these different people who filtered through, and there's a whole host of others. If you're listening to this and you're like, he didn't mention me, I know who you are. I appreciate you. But my point is that you and Mindy started that. And we've been together a long time. How old are you?
I am 29. Yeah, I'll be 30 in February of next year.
Oh, gosh. So from 16.
15 or 16.
15 or 16.
Yes.
And so, it's a compliment to me. Oftentimes, our names are coupled together, especially when we're talking about simplify stuff. People around here, I'm in Middle Missouri now, for folks who don't know that. Connor's still in South Georgia, but people here in Middle Missouri, they associate the two of us, and which is always a compliment. But then the transformation, right? So the health transformation episode, the podcast that we did, gained a lot of traction and really inspired a lot of people. And so very often I get asked from people here and from some people down there, how is Connor? Where is Connor? How's he doing in his health walk? Is he happy and healthy? And how are they? So yeah. So give us the skinny. How are you? Where are you? What are you doing? You look great. So obviously the health transformation wasn't a flash in the pan. So catch us up.
Yeah, man, it's been quite the journey. Obviously the initial year or so of like the big drop, because I think I came into January of, was it 19? January of 19, and this wasn't my highest weight, but I got on the scale and I was not a frequent scaler. Like I did not step on a lot of scales. Like I think my driver's license still said 295 when I knew when I put it down that I was not 295. But I didn't know. Yeah, I truly didn't have really an idea of what I was. But that January, first or second, whatever day it was, I was 334. I weighed 334 pounds. And, I'm 6'1", and so that was the thing. First time I'd really seen the number on like a, home scale. I've always been a little terrified of the doctor's office because every time you want to go for something, they want to weigh you. And, you know, uh, if you're a person who's struggled with weight, you understand that feeling of being like, no, I can just give me some medicine. I don't want to go to that doctor. I mean, and it's crazy to think
Yeah.
that, that limitation was so real all the time. But that January weighing in, seeing the number, um, right before that, telling the guys like, "Hey, I'm gonna try something," and I really think this is the time. I want to run, 10 5Ks, and I'm gonna need someone to either run them with me or someone to, just a kick in the rear end, an encouraging word, whatever the thing is. I'm gonna need a whole bunch of it because I'd tried, like any person who's struggled with their weight. I'd tried a billion times before. Um,
Yeah.
some bouts more successful than others, but nothing really long lasting. And I think it was, I probably ended that year, somewhere floating around 205, 210, something like that. And then ran
Wow.
a half marathon in January, probably right around the same number, kind of a deal. And since then, man, it's really just been life. It's been everything in between, and I've struggled a lot. As good of a season I'm in right now, as far as the balance, it it is truly a journey. One of my greatest
Hmm.
fears, selfishly, was that I'd be a person who lost weight, got healthy, and then gained it back. And I don't know why, because
Sure.
I've never, if another person has done that in my life, I've never thought anything negatively about them. But for me personally, I was just like, I don't want it. I don't want to do that. Um, and it really, it's from the outside, I don't know if it's been as noticeable, but there's been seasons though where it still fluctuated a lot, maybe
Okay.
because of my frame, maybe just because of my level of activity. When I did pick up weight, sometimes I could gain a little bit more or lose a little bit more and it go a little under the radar. But there were still times in these last couple of years that I've picked up some pounds, maybe 20, 30 pounds here, and then been able to drop it. So it's still been trying to figure out what sustainable life looks like, in pursuit of not a number on the scale. Because, of course, I had that battle early
Hmm.
on, too, not in kind of getting past that
Yeah.
or wanting to get past it a lot of times, but really just attaining that level of health that allows for freedom, because
Hmm.
that was the whole thing is, I talked about it just a couple of minutes ago, but I was scared to go to a doctor,
Yeah.
and that's a limitation people don't think about. But there were times where I was like, man, I don't want to see the scale and I don't want them to see it or me have to tell them, don't tell me, kind of a deal. And I was like, I might have put myself in harm's way because I didn't want to look at a number. And then not to
Hmm.
mention all the physical limitations that kind of came with it. And so to switch the focus, um, to the pursuit of freedom instead of the pursuit of a number on the scale has really meant all the difference. And that people still continue, whether it's an encouraging word to me or whether it's them sharing their story about, maybe how something that I said resonated with them and it was the kick that they needed or it
Hmm.
was the word that they needed to maybe not even pursue a really long health journey, but just the freedom to let go of the number, and just be like, man, I
Hmm.
just want to be able to do stuff. And that's, at the end of the day, I was just like, I wanted to be at a place where if someone asked me to do something, I didn't have to worry about it. I was like, I'm
Yeah.
tired of going to a wedding and worrying about breaking a chair. Like that's something
Yeah.
again that
Yeah.
it's maybe only you know, a smaller group of people know about. But I mean, that's like a fear I just carried around all the time. I'm like, I got to
Sure.
kind of, put more weight in my legs so I can halfway standing up. And there's some just weird stuff. And I'm like, I don't want to do this anymore. I just want to sit and
Hmm.
not worry about it. I want to say yes to a hike and not think about, is something going to happen halfway through? And it's been, it's been super tough, but there's not been a moment that I've regretted it, you know?
Yeah. Do you feel better physically, mentally, emotionally? Do you do? Is it? What's the difference? Is there a difference?
I kind of wish not. I say I wish. I really don't. But I think the same when I went to the doctor right before late 2018. I went to the doctor for blood work, and I was expecting and hoping that was going to be my kick in the pants to go ahead and get moving,
Hmm.
and it wasn't. My numbers were fine, and it's pretty impressive to have okay numbers. uh, you know,
Yeah.
to be what a doctor would consider 80 pounds past obese. Like
Hmm.
it was not impressive, but they were very clear though that the numbers, while they were okay right now, was not sustainable, and it was afforded only
Hmm.
by probably my level of activity and my age. But that
Hmm.
your body does not continue to give you that grace. The further you get.
So you were 25 or 26, you think? 20,
Yeah, yeah,
25?
yeah, right
Yeah.
around there, and they were like, so it's fine now, but it can't be forever, and I
Right.
can tell you that. They're like, I don't know how long it is, but you're on borrowed time. And
Hmm.
so that was a thing, because I kind of wanted that to happen. And again, maybe because of the age, I never really struggled with the sleep. I never really struggled with energy. I never really struggled with all of those things. But I can tell you that in seasons since, as I have, um, you know, I've gotten older, and I have friends who do
Hmm.
talk about, lower back issues or their knees or not wanting to get up and do this thing, because I've been able to
Hmm.
continue some version of working out, whether it's running,
Hmm.
whether it's walking, whether it's pickleball, disc golf, whatever the thing is, it's always fine. You know,
Yeah.
I still sleep like
Yeah.
a rock. As soon as I touch the bed, I'm dead asleep. I wake up and I feel
Yeah.
right. If I need to get up, like right now, my current rhythm is I get up at 4:30, and I'm usually out of the house about 4:45, and I don't do anything crazy. Walk a couple of miles with the dog, come
Hmm.
back in, get the house ready and Annie ready to go for the workday, and that's about it. And and from that, just kind of small amount of exercise right there, and kind of practicing that consistent rhythm, it's all pretty good. And
Hmm.
the interesting thing, kind of, the bummer, but also the nice thing that I can recognize it, is that I can tell the weeks that I don't. I can tell the weeks.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
crazy to think
Yeah.
that, even though walking 2 miles, 3 miles, 4 miles might not feel like that much, if I get a couple of days where I just haven't moved, other than that office,
Oh, yeah.
and it feels like it. It feels like I remember in days of training Luke and Rose in the yard, and there were days you could tell where they didn't get to run, and
Hmm.
they were pains in the butt. Like they didn't listen to you. They
Hmm.
were a little stir crazy. They were a little quicker, a little more headstrong, and I'm like, man, why am I so irritable today? Why am I so
Yeah.
short on patience? Why am I so snippy? And it's almost always, I'm just a dog that needs to run a little bit. And
I think we all are, though, right? I mean, it's one of those things where you don't want to do it, but then once you are or have, then you're glad that you did. Um, you talked about Annie. I want to hop over that. We're coming back for sure. She's going to have a whole segment. And you talked about The Office. I want to hold off on that. We're going to come back to that too. But like I talked about these rhythms of grace, but everybody is wanting to talk about community. So my question is kind of in retro, and you touched on it some, not just, I mean, yes, in your health journey, but just kind of in general, how instrumental has authentic community, the authenticity, how scary is that? How hard is it to sit down with a friend, even though you've been together a long time, and say, here's my struggles. here's my fears, to kind of allow somebody beyond the wall, you know, beyond the curtain. And then what were your expectations of how that would be received when you were talking about maybe having those conversations? What was the reality? And then through all of that, it's a three-part question. Through all of that, how instrumental was community in, say, from 2018 to 2023?
Not to answer it at all in the order in which you have asked it. But community is, I'm pretty sure, whether you like this answer or not, it is, I'd say, unavoidable. As far as success,
Yeah.
as far as success, I think a lot of people try to. I mean, there's even like probably some version of a movement on just in pop culture and media that the lone wolf mentality of you're the one who's got to handle it, you've got to do this, you've got to be the one to make the decision, and there's definitely truth to that about you at the end of the day. Even if I have a great group of friends, I'm not getting up at 4:30 because of anything that any of them say, So, I mean, at the end, it is definitely still based on personal decisions. But I think for that long-term success, and I think for kind of, especially developing some of the passion that you have for whatever the thing is, whether it's running, walking, pickleball, disc golf, whatever the thing is, I think they help fuel it. And I think that create something long term, because I mean, me, we've journeyed for a long time, and I'm not dissimilar from a lot of people. Like I might get into stuff more than most people, but I'm to some degree cyclical. I have seasons of this thing where I'm very into this, and I might transition at some point into something else. But I think what creates some of that intensity and creates some of the longevity for those things, it's definitely the people. Because whether it is disc golf, where I have a great group of guys and who I can always call on, and not just about disc golf stuff, like about life stuff. It turns from a guy that you can go out there and throw frisbees around in the woods with, to a guy you can call when you have a flat tire, or a guy when something happens in someone's family that you rally around and help out. Or pickleball has been one that's been really interesting, because you go out there and truly at this point, because the sport's so dang big, you go out there and you got people who are 10 years old all the way up to, you got people playing like competitively, people I've played with in their 70s. And it's just such a cool group of people where they're like, hey man, didn't see you on Monday night. Hope you're doing well. Or if I post up that I'm playing somewhere in town, they're like, I'm going to come out to that. And to see somebody and you're like, whoa, that's the guy I've been playing with for the past few weeks. Stuff like that. It has just been so much more instrumental than I could have ever imagined, and it's.
So when you're saying playing out somewhere in town, you're talking about music.
Yeah, sorry. So if I'm playing a gig, and then it's kind of this crossing over of worlds, which is what community is. Because to me, community, I guess it could be bound to a specific thing, but like the real depth of community is when it starts to cross over all over the place. It moves from the pickleball courts to the dinner table, to the gig across town, to the whatever it is.
Which is the authentic part, right? So I mean, we do community in silos.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like you got your office people, you got your church people, you got your this people, but when we morph into authentic community, all of that goes together like spaghetti in a blender, you know?
No, for sure. And it means the difference. I'm trying to think of like, just one of my buddies from work showed up to a gig of mine. I was playing out in Perry, and he showed up with his girlfriend and some friends, and small gesture, but it meant the world to me, because it was somebody kind of crossing over worlds and saying like, I'm willing to put myself out there. And he might not think of it this way at all. Sorry, Daniel. But, but he put himself out there and went to something and let me know without saying, hey man, I'm here to support you. like, hey, I'm here to support you with my presence, and how much that meant to me, and how much moving forward that lets me know in our interactions, like, oh, I can be a little more real with him. Hey, I can be a little bit more vulnerable with him, and stuff like that, that in all of the pursuits, especially with the health journey, but really every aspect of life. I mean, the more people you can find like that, surround yourself with those people, but also be that person for other people.
Yeah,
You're just
yeah,
going to
yeah.
be so much. It's, I mean, to some degree, it's insurance. It's like you're just, it's a solid investment to make in a non-selfish way, but
Yeah,
it's nearly foolproof. When you surround yourself with good
yeah.
people.
And three-quarter of that battle is showing up. It's practice the ministry of presence is the way that I like to
Yeah,
say
it's
it.
good.
But practice this ministry of presence. Just show up, be consistent, show up for people. Not necessarily even to say or do anything. Like Daniel, I think you said Daniel, but I mean, just show up. And that I think that's a key piece to the authentic part of community. It's easy to show up like for the highlights. It's quite another thing to show up for the kind of the mundane.
Oh yeah, but I mean, if you think about it, and I was just talking with a buddy the other day, and not to get into the specifics of the conversation, but we talked about kind of the mundane portion of a life of faith, and how so many people are afraid of it. People will get on these spiritual highs, and then 6 months later, you don't really see them posting anymore, or you don't see them, and it's not because they were ever. I don't associate it at all with them being fake, but I do associate it with, we have such a fear of normal. We have such a fear of, and maybe it's a fear based in something right. Maybe it is a fear of things, not wanting to be complacent and not wanting to settle. So maybe there is some good basis out of it, but a lot of times we will, I think, put ourselves in positions where we and I'm there a lot of times, but where we value the highs and we value the lows, and we're not really interested in the middle. But I hate to break it to people, but most of life is going to be in the middle. And so, like, get comfortable with the slight ascension and the slight descension, because the highs and lows, honestly, I mean, they're going to be a blip in comparison. So it's like I got to find some Monday through Friday people, and and that's tough. That's tough for a lot of people.
Well, and sometimes that mundane is a simple text.
Oh yeah.
I can't tell you what it means to me if in my community and our people, out of the blue, to get a text message, hey dude, thinking about you, miss you, or hey man, for some reason I was driving down the road, saw something, made me think of you, paused to pray, just want to let you know. And so it's, I mean, yeah, it is big stuff, but in that mundane, in that middle, gosh, that's a good word. We do, because we seek the thrills, right? Like we seek the highs, and we do all that we can to avoid the lows. Man, that's good.
It's just, it's tough because it is, I think, in our attraction to it, to the intensity. I mean, like you said, it's easy to show up to the award ceremony. It's easy to show up to some degree, like when, someone loses their grandpa or something like that. And not to say that those things don't have value, because again, the ministry of presence, it does. But there's going to be so many more days of not those things.
Just the normal.
Just the normal. And it's
just
like, and that's the day they get beat up on. That's the day that they need encouragement on, because it's just so needed. And it's tough though, because again, if we like the intensity, then we want to be there for people in the intense moments. And so it does require a different level of intentionality, and it requires doing things that sometimes I've sent that text and they either didn't respond, or they just said thanks. And I'm like, oh, I kind of wanted a little something, like maybe, screenshot this and put it on Facebook or something. Like, But
Yeah,
sometimes you just do it because it's the right thing to do, and because in the
yeah.
moment it's the right thing, and who cares?
Well, and because it's true,
Yes,
though, right?
100%.
So, like, even in the segue into this, which was a hot mess, I'm sure I'm gonna go back and watch that, and it's gonna take everything within me not to edit it out, but I'm not going to. Um, to take the time to be true. If it's not true, don't send it. But if you did hear a song that made you think about somebody or something and smile, take the time once you get
Yeah,
stopped. Don't break any traffic laws, but send the text. And yeah, I love that. I thought I'd get more of a response. The flip side of that is there's sometimes I get those, and it's not that I'm any more busy than anybody else. We're all busy. We're too busy, actually. Um, but there's sometimes where I don't respond because I get it in the middle of something. And then later I'm like, oh my gosh, I didn't respond. So then I got to send a thing explaining why I didn't respond and how much it meant to me. So, um, yeah, that's good. The middle. So, all right. So let's go to the office. So, you have made a shift. Um, tell us about just this past year. Um, First of all, so that everybody knows what we're talking about, explain the shift. And then just kind of as you're willing and comfortable, talk me through what led into that, talk me through the process, talk me through what the experience has been like for you. How is it now after having come through that stuff? Let's talk about that a little
yeah,
bit.
man. So it was January, super early January. I can't remember what my start day was. January 6th, January 4th. Who's to say? I moved out of formal ministry where I had been for 8, 9, 10 years, something like that, somewhere in that range,
Yep.
um,
Yep.
to a company out of Perry, Georgia, here in the Middle Georgia area. Um, and it's a company you would never know exists, or a field you know exists, or in my job you would never know exists. But I am an asset condition specialist for a company called USG Water Solutions, and
Mm-hmm.
I basically write customer reports and write spec jobs for water tower maintenance. So we have
Okay.
contracts all over the country where we do yearly inspections, renovations, general maintenance and stuff like that. All sorts of stuff in between too. Anyone who works
Mm-hmm.
there, I'm probably butchering what we actually do because it's always bigger than I think it is. Um,
Yeah.
but made the shift from formal ministry into what most in the church world would consider the secular world.
Second. Yeah. So from vocational ministry full
Yep.
time, vocational ministry into the civilian
Yeah.
life. So was that scary? I know it was emotional. I mean, you and I have communicated through
Sure.
all
Sure.
this, so I'm kind of leading you into, but talk through kind of the months, however far before you want to go into that. What was that like? How was the Lord? How did that come about? What were you feeling? What was coming out of your prayer time, reading time, scripture? How did you arrive at this shift? I
Yeah,
guess
man, it was freaking terrifying for sure.
I bet.
Especially
Yeah,
for me
yeah,
because
yeah.
I have this uh, kind of daydreamy, wandering nature, but I don't change a lot of things. Like I really and truly like I married the girl that I started dating when I was 15. Um,
And you both did
yeah,
very
I mean
well.
I super definitely shot up for that one, and so you gotta lock that down as early as you can. You don't strike gold twice, I've been told. Um,
Oh, I remember. I remember the. I
hey,
remember
chill out.
the.
There's nothing.
I remember the roll comb and the bangs that curled.
How dare you?
I remember braces, Mindy. But anyhow, don't want to interrupt your thought. Yeah, so you.
Yeah, and so for having this kind of always daydreaming of something new, something different, I'm very much a I don't even know if you'd want to call it a creature of habit, because some people associate that too with being complacent. And but I when I get into something, I like to commit. I like to be a part of things. I like to see things through. I'm definitely not abandoned halfway through. If anything, sometimes I might even lend towards the staying around too long sometimes, because also having a little
Yeah.
bit of the control freak, you want to make sure things are just so. Um,
Mhm.
but it was a beautifully difficult season of not wanting to leave, but knowing it was time to leave. Um,
Mm.
because everyone, and I was able to leave the church in a super healthy way, and I am
Of course.
probably
Yeah.
more grateful for that than anything. Because I have so many
Okay.
friends who have left ministry, and it has not been that way. They have not
Yeah.
desired to go
Me too.
back. They didn't want to go into either church work, or they didn't want to even go and worship at a church. They didn't want anything to do with it. And I was and am so deeply in love with the work of the church, like God's actual church. That
Mhm.
it was healthy, and it was beautiful. And there's still things that you would, if you could go back and change or adjust, you would, things you can't know
Yeah.
about. But like,
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
people were so wholly good and encouraging and loving and supporting of me and Mindy and this next season. Um,
Mhm.
and so all of that was really good. But God, he had laid into me for quite some time, and I had a peace finally. And I had the peace probably earlier than Mindy did, but when Mindy finally got the peace, I felt good about it, because I'm an emotional creature.
Mhm.
And we both can be, but it's usually, if one's kind of on that ups and downs, one is that steady force. And
Mhm.
so when Mindy got to the place where she didn't want to go, but she knew it was time to go, then I knew it was time. Because
Mm.
both of us were sitting there like the day of, we're like, I bet you they would just hire me back. I bet I could just stay.
This is like your
Yeah,
last
this is like the
Sunday. Then
last Sunday. This
I'm
is like,
guessing like
yeah, this
it's.
is
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
Sunday before the last, and then weeks after. I'm like,
Yeah. Yeah.
I
Yeah.
don't think it'd be that embarrassing if I just went ahead and went back, because it was
Yeah.
just something that in my heart I did not want to do, but in my soul I knew I needed to do. Um,
Wow.
and that's tough, because then when people have questions and they want to know why, and they want to know who upset you, and they want to know, some people have the real
Yeah.
answer, real questions, and some people don't. And you want to be. My desire is always to be transparent. But I have
Mhm.
realized, in being an open book and being transparent, that sometimes, not dissimilar to scripture and casting your pearls before swine, and not to say that these people are swine
Mhm.
by any means, but
Yeah. No, I'm with you. Yeah.
sometimes the real and true thing is not to be said in front of this person, because maybe the way they'll take it, maybe the season they're
Yeah.
in. And I was trying to be extremely cognizant of that when I was speaking with people, because you just never want to do any damage, because I loved and
Yeah.
loved the church so much that I never wanted to say anything that made people like, oh, Connor's leaving, I got to go too. Because it wasn't
Mhm.
like that. I'd be like, guys, I promise you, if
Mhm.
I didn't have this feeling in my soul, I would 1 billion% stay. And until you hear
Mhm.
God say otherwise, you should stay too. And
Yeah.
and so to have those conversations was tough, because as I'm sitting there wrestling with whether or not I should, I got other people. Everyone's, what happened? Yeah,
True.
what's happened? What's wrong? No,
Yeah.
stay here. Well, and all the stuff.
Yeah.
And people supply their own reasons and stuff like that. And at the end of the day, I'm like, it's not money, it's not time, it's not this, it's 100% an obedience that I feel that I cannot avoid, even though I so desperately want to. Because I would stay here
Mhm.
till I can't sing anymore, till I can
Yeah.
only do this part of my job. Because I was like, I'll stick around and we'll figure it out, kind
Yeah.
of a deal. And so that was super tough, and especially to have been in the place that I was before entering vocational ministry, where I was, going pre-pharmacy and then called into
Hmm.
ministry.
I
So I go into
remember.
sales to pay for
Yeah.
college until I can get the job at the church. And to some part, you're like, man, I'm regressing. Like, this is
Yeah.
some opposite prodigal son story where the son leaves again.
Yeah. Yeah.
uh,
So I had a thought while you're going, not to
yeah.
interrupt you, but so do you think that, because I've been in those situations, I would bet probably a high number of our people who will watch this or listen to it, I hope, have been in those situations. So, like, you get people who come to you and they say, what's going on? What's really happening? And so you answer them from this place of vulnerability and authenticity. You answer them as truthfully as you possibly can. And then their response is, yeah, that sounds real nice, but you don't have to tell me like what you're supposed to tell me, what's really going on. I
Yeah.
mean, and so what I'm leaning into here is, how often does that keep us? We're talking about authentic community. How often does that keep us from the authenticity? How many times does it take to try to explain a spiritual thing to a non-spiritual person, to only to be dismissed? How many times does that take before we just quit trying to explain it and just say, it's just what I'm supposed to do, and leave it at that? I mean, rhetorical question. I mean, I know we got to keep,
Yeah.
but in the church of all places, and like you said, which I love the church, not a church, but Christ's
Hmm.
church. I love the body of Christ, and I love the work of the body of Christ in the world. But there's people in churches that do not understand spiritually truthful, simple
Mm.
answers. I don't know if this happened to you, but there was a time I was leaving a job there, and they were like, "What's it going to take? Do you need a raise?" I'm like, "Nope." What's it going to take to get you to stay? I'm like, it's not about money. That we're being obedient.
Yeah.
And so then the phone rings, and it's another person. They're like, "Hey, I know so and so called and asked, and you told them this, but we're really close buddies. Like, you can really tell me, what's your number? What do you have to
Yeah.
have?"
Yeah. And it, and it,
And
and it
you,
feels it. I think in their defense, I think it's authentic. A lot of times they're really like, hey man, I get it. What do you need? I want to take care of you. I
yeah,
get it. You're a guy who wants to support your family. And I think they really,
yeah,
to the best of their ability in that moment, especially because they're also processing emotional feelings that they might not even know. Um,
hmm,
but I had grace for those people in those conversations, because I'm like, eventually, I think given more time, you wouldn't have called me with this. I think you did this out of a knee jerk, out of trying to. I was like, because I don't think you understand yet, and I think they will though, and I think
hmm,
maybe they don't.
hmm,
I hope, because
yeah,
that was a big thing, for ministry. They're like, well, you have a baby now, and the housing market's getting crazy and all this stuff. Like we want to do that, and I'm like, I promise you, I said I was willing to take a pay cut to leave, and
hmm,
because it just doesn't matter. Like that's not the
hmm,
reason. You guys couldn't do anything. I could work 1 hour a week for
hmm,
50,000 more dollars, and
hmm,
I, as crazy as it sounds, I wouldn't even think about it. I wouldn't even
hmm.
like take. I wouldn't at that point. Like I'm realistic, which is crazy to think about, because I am driven by money to a fault, and I'm driven by
Sure,
success in a workplace and freedom of time. Like,
yeah,
but I don't even think I would
yeah,
take it to God and be like, all right, they came back with another offer. I would, and that's when
yeah,
I knew. That's when I knew, when money didn't
hmm,
change anything, when time or commitment, anything
hmm,
changed. none of it swayed me in a different direction than what the peace I had already been given. And
Obedience trumps
100%.
all.
And you can tell when people are being fake with the obedience, because the first time you come with that offer,
Oh
they're
yeah,
like, I'll take it. And you're
yeah,
like, oh, that's interesting, you
yeah,
know. And
yeah,
for me, I'd be
yeah.
that person.
And
And so that's when I knew. I was like, oh, this is good. This is almost
yeah,
double confirmation for me, because I am an
yeah,
easy one to fall for the
yeah,
trappings of the world. Like
yeah.
it's something.
So that was the lead up into
Yeah.
leaving. Even like you talked about sitting in worship your last day, and you and Mindy are like,
Yeah.
um, so then tell me about the transition. Tell me about what you found in the real world, in the secular workplace. What's that experience been like? How has it paralleled ministry? Um, is there? Do you still have opportunity to serve people well? And let's talk about that a little bit.
No, man, it's a good question, because I get it every now and then, and I just enjoy the conversation, because I feel like I'm revealed something new every time. And the transition was tough. It's one of those when you're switching from a little bit more flexibility to something that's a little bit more, black and white. It's times, it's days.
Mhm.
If you want to take an extra hour on a lunch, it's like, well, write that, take that off your, all this like just normal
Mhm.
stuff. Like
Oh yeah.
it was a transition in that way. But I guess because I was ready for it for so long, it didn't, and I was already kind of a creature of habit anyways with that sort of stuff. I was never a big fan of, I was already embracing structure kind of in ministry,
Yeah.
maybe more than some. And so that didn't feel like it hit me as hard, but it was the fear of entering into a place where you know, I wasn't leaning on my ability to care for people. I wasn't leaning on my ability to sing. I wasn't leaning on my ability to build teams or to train people. Like this is something I freaking don't know anything about. And they were very
Yeah.
clear in the job like interview that you will not know anything about it. This doesn't exist anywhere else.
Yeah. Yeah.
And but it's been so freaking good. It's been
Mhm.
truly and I knew when I was in the job interview, and I was so brutally and unnecessarily honest about where I talked about probably more spiritual stuff in the interview than I did with people.
I remember you
And
telling
I knew by the way it was, honestly, I just knew when they called me back and said, yeah, you can have it. I was like, well, that's pretty good. So they know up front I'm a crazy person. Um,
me. Yeah.
but
A
yeah,
kook.
but truly gave me a shot, and it's just been so good. Um, and I do believe it's half because it's something that I was supposed to do. Um, but
Mhm.
then but then also I think because we left when we were supposed to, and I think a lot of people deal with
Mhm.
the next season being tougher than it has to be because they either left too early or they stayed too long. And so
Mhm.
a lot of people have to detox, and they have to, and I didn't feel that need. I was immediately like,
Mhm.
we no longer have a place on Sunday morning, so we want to find that thing. I've got to figure out how to connect with these people in the office in a way that I had, because I loved my coworkers at the church and stuff like that. I was like, I've got to find this, because these aren't things that are exclusive to a church. It's stuff I've really only known in a church. But I was like, but I'm not willing to give it up. Like, I got to be able to joke
Mhm.
around. I got to be able to get real when it's time. And like all of the stuff, I was like, it can exist, but it might just look a different way. And it has been that. It's been
Wow.
getting close with people. And instead of being able to practice the gifts in the black and white ways that I was able to, like bring a meal or sit down
Mhm.
with somebody and hold their hand while you're waiting for somebody to, pass, or yeah,
Transition.
or
Yeah.
or whether you are up there playing the guitar and trying to clearly give the people a word that God's given you for them or somebody in
Mhm.
the room. When you're when you're still called to show those to display your gifts, to offer your gifts to people in service, but it's not the way you have been doing it. And it's not in this
Hmm.
traditional sense. Like it's daunting a little bit because it's not as clear whether or not it's working. It's the fruits
Hmm.
sometimes seem even a little bit more, few and far in between. But the shift has been in such a good way. It has been, I feel called to do my job excellently, and I already did. But that's something in the workforce that I think both in church work and the secular world, where people do the job as much as they have to, and they're kind of done.
Hmm.
And I'm just of the mindset that I have been given some version of ability, some version of talent, some version of gift, whatever that thing is, a drive, and that I'm supposed to use that in whatever direction whatever's in front of me at that time. And
Hmm.
so for me, it has been setting an example of there, because there's nothing like a Christian dude showing up and then finding out he's the worst worker at a place. Or, you got the
Yeah.
dude who,
Say it again for the
yeah, I mean,
people in
or
the
he's,
back.
he
Yes.
slaps the Jesus fish on
Yeah.
the work truck, and
Yeah.
they're
Yeah.
skimming money off of people's, and it's like, no, what? Yeah, I was like,
Yeah.
I'm a firm believer that a true Christ follower, a person who's living that intimate life in like step and step with Christ, a surrendered life, and one in community with other people where people are holding you accountable. We should be the freaking best at everything, and not for
Yeah.
our, of course, not for our own good, but we should be the most
Hmm.
creative. We should have the highest
Hmm.
production. We should, our ability to connect with people should be supernatural in its ability, our ability to communicate, our ability, all of those things, because if we are doing it with excellence,
Hmm.
then I just don't see how you kind of get to another place. And so for me, it's been that I'm setting the example of, you're not going to catch me doing something that is underhanded. You're not going to catch me talking about
Hmm.
somebody in a way that's not honoring of that person. You're not going to catch me
Hmm.
not achieving what I'm supposed to achieve at work. And so it's one of those deals. It's just kind of living, living that life in the secular world with excellence, because I think it can be done. And
Yeah.
and if anything, there's an opportunity that is so untapped. And it's not a plague of the church as much as it is. It's just maybe a plague in modern Christianity. But there seems to be this. We send our best to school for ministry, and we send them to the churches to work. But if you think about it, man, like there's so many more unsaved
Yeah.
people.
They are a tiny. Yeah.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
I
I'm with
want
you.
I
Yeah.
want our best. I want them in the churches too. Don't get me wrong, but I want them
Sure.
everywhere.
Yeah.
I want them
Yeah.
working for the water tower company. I want them working at the cell phone
Yeah.
company. I want them at a car lot.
With excellence.
Exactly.
With
Yeah, knocking
excellence.
knocking it
Yeah.
out of the park. Not that they would be glorified, but that people would see in them this
That's
this
exactly
this
right.
thing, this difference, and that it would
Yeah.
make them realize, instead of being the stumbling block that it can be for a lot of other people. And
Hmm.
so that's just been it's been so cool to build those relationships with people in an office, um, where things aren't as black and white as they are in ministry, but
Hmm.
the relationships are just as real, and the conversations are just as real, and they can go as shallow or as deep as you want to take them. Um,
Hmm.
and it's been very, very sweet. Very, very different.
Have you found
Yeah,
community?
I mean, like the people that I work with, there's even even the people who I with relative confidence that we don't believe the same thing. There's such
Sure.
a level of respect and honor. Just, and that sounds like if
Hmm.
the people who I work with hear that, they're going to be like, that's a little over the top.
That's what. So honest, 1,000% transparency. Right now, I'm sitting here thinking, how much of this is he thinking? Oh, these people might listen
Yeah,
to
no, and,
this.
and I hope they do, because
Yeah.
there is and it's not like a overly, like, it's a normal office place. It's not like lovey dovey, like people
Yeah.
hanging out on
Yeah.
bean
Yeah.
bags,
Yeah. Yeah.
but
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
just
Yeah. Yeah.
real life with real people, and you get
Yeah.
glimpses day to day of a different a different side to a person. And maybe it is me and being my personality type who's looking for that and who's recognizing it. But there's just they're good people. And
Do you think that can be created? Do you think that can be fostered
I
anywhere?
think so. I mean, I think I'd be naive to say absolutely everywhere. I'm sure there's some circumstance or some place
Sure.
that would be much harder or maybe would verge on impossible. Um,
Hmm.
but I think if you are approaching it with some level of intentionality and you're doing your job with excellence and you are allowing yourself to be open, um,
Hmm.
I think it allows it because I think that there's even been things that have happened since I've been there. Not that I've changed it, but when you allow yourself to be open and goofy and
Hmm.
real and to talk about things that are maybe a touch more in depth than they have dealt with before, you then allow them to. And they can either
Hmm.
reciprocate or not. But you are, in a way,
Hmm.
when you are open and honest with somebody, you are giving them permission to do that same
Hmm.
thing. And so I believe it is something that I think you can create it most places that you go, but
Hmm.
it's not easy. And maybe I was fortunate that there were
Yeah.
some really solid people already there fostering a little bit of that, and it's maybe been more
Hmm.
seamless, but it's just been not without its trials, not without its difficulties or uncomfortableness, awkward moments, but it's been good. It's been really good.
A lot of the normal that we
Yeah,
talked
it's been
about.
a
I mean,
lot of
there's,
normal.
I'm
It's a lot
sure,
of.
a
I
lot
mean, you're
of the
talking
normal.
about I have the most desk job there is. I go into the office
Yeah.
with, if I worked out that morning, I go into the office with 7,000 steps and I leave with 7,200 steps. Like it is an
Yeah.
office job
Yeah.
with a relatively
Yeah.
small team, and I have three screens in front of me, and it's an office job, but it's just been
Yeah.
when you apply that kind of intentionality and that desire for something, stuff just always
Hmm.
shows up, you know?
So you talked about trying to find a new space, a new place to
Yeah.
worship. Tell me about that process. What was that like? How long did you take? How many places did you go? How did you arrive? Have you found a place?
Yeah, we have found a place that we feel
Okay,
very, very good about. And it was freaking brutal. I'm saying freaking a lot. That's just how you
that's
know I'm real. Um 'cause-
Yeah.
but it was tough. I am critical to a fault. What
Yeah.
makes you good at some things is also can be used in the opposite direction. So what
Yeah.
makes you
What is your blessing is
yeah,
your
yeah,
curse.
that's a way more acceptable saying than the nonsense I just spewed. But like the thing that made me good at ministry, catching the little things, caring about the tiny detail, picking up on this, makes it so brutal to go to church
I bet.
services. Because
Yeah.
I just think like, oh, here's what I would do. Like anybody was asking.
It's hard to sit. It's hard to sit through some though. Am I
Oh no,
wrong?
no,
Not knocking anybody. Not
no,
that's not pointed. I'm just saying it's hard to sit through some of
no,
them.
no, for sure. And that's what you wrestle with is what is rightful and what isn't, what's needed and what
Right.
isn't, because I definitely was approaching
Yep.
services where I was like, have they hired me as a consultant, because I have a lot of opinions that they have not asked
Yeah.
for, and that most of
Yeah.
them have no value outside of my personal preference. And so once
Hmm.
we were able to kind of, and when I say once, like we probably went to like 9 church services before I was able to like slow down.
Different
And it might have
churches
been
or nine at this one place that you
we
settled
we
on.
set early on that we wanted to go to every prospective church twice. Um,
Okay.
we gave that up very quickly. uh, well, and it's just a lot, man. It's a lot, and here's what I learned, and this is for you. This is for anybody in ministry, but this is also for you if you are looking for a church home. I give you so much. I give so much grace to a visitor, where as
Gosh.
a church worker, couldn't stand visitors because I just felt like, and they're not going to come back because no one shook their hand and the music wasn't right, or this was too dark, and I just thought they were whiny and I thought they were beggy and all that stuff. And I'm like,
Yeah.
going to that many different churches and every single
Yeah.
week feeling like it was going to a new school where you don't know where the
Yeah.
bathrooms are at, you don't know where people sit, you don't know anything
Yeah.
about it. Like, it's so weird to walk into a
Gosh, that's
you don't
good.
know what it's like to walk into a building that you've never walked into. It's
Yeah.
so, you don't think about it, you take it for granted. Or I walk into the same church
Hmm.
for 9 years straight. I don't think about it. I know where I dropped my guitar pick the week before, kind of a deal. And
Yeah.
to walk into all of these places and not know where stuff is, not know how things happen, not to even really, you know what you're to expect, but you don't know what to expect.
Yeah.
And to go in it with all these hopes and aspirations too, like maybe this is our forever home. Maybe I'm about to make the greatest friends, or maybe the Spirit's going to move in this crazy way that He's never moved before, and it's going to happen today. And you're just going with all these
Yeah.
emotions. It's almost like a first date, like the butterflies of anticipation and fear and all of these things
Sure.
mixing. And for me and Mindy, that was brutal because we're also, we have Annie with us, and so you're toggling. Now I'm a visitor as a child, and then I have a totally different grace for people bringing their kids to kids ministry and stuff like that. And
Yeah.
not that we didn't
Yeah.
trust the churches we were going to, but we didn't know anybody, so we were trying to keep Annie with us. And then so you're trying to go to a church service with a, you know,
Mhm.
not even a 1 year old, and trying to sit through it and enjoy it and finding balance in
So
that.
imagine all that. Imagine all that if you were not a believer, or if you were a believer who, like a lot of us, had wandered
Yeah.
away and are trying to come back. Imagine all that you just
No.
described, but having the added layer of um, I'm not where I need to be. I'm not who I was, or I'm not who I want to be. I'm bringing some of this in. I can't. I literally cannot imagine. It would
It'd be so
be.
freaking hard. It'd be so.
It would be
If it
so
was
hard.
me, and I've told this to people so many times when they just like, if I didn't know in whatever way that I know that God is real and that He's moved, and that I wholly
Mhm,
accept what the Bible says, and that Jesus is who He says He
mhm,
is, I wouldn't.
mhm.
I would not play church for one Sunday if I
Yeah,
didn't
me
have
either.
it. If I didn't, and it sounds terrible. If I didn't have to, there's no. And so
Yeah,
if I
yeah,
was
yeah.
a person who is new to the faith, or a person who's apprehensive, goodness gracious, there's
Mhm,
no way I would go to more than one church. Not for me personally.
mhm,
There's not a remote chance I would
mhm,
try twice. And so
mhm,
it gave me, and which is why, to now be entering into the next season of finding a place and getting to serve there. It gives me a perspective that in ministry, for as long as I never, if anything, I had a negative view of visitors. And
mhm,
now to be like, this is a big day for them. This is a big
mhm,
season for them. This is a big what, and they have
mhm.
totally different circumstances than us. Maybe some easier, some more difficult. I want them to freaking know that whether it is this place or the next place they go to, you're doing the right thing
Mhm.
and you will find it, and
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
something else. Gosh.
A- And that I've always thought, of course, in my current ministry context, it doesn't necessarily apply, but I've always thought it would be healthy if you had your staff, if you were in church work, and if you had your staff on a rotation where you encourage them to go and visit other churches once every 4 to 6
Sure.
weeks. Um, so that they can be in the room and not be at
Yeah.
work, so they can be in the room and not have to be at the front of the room. But B, there is that thread, that experience of walking into a foreign place, of not knowing where the restrooms are, not knowing what you just went through. That's healthy when we come back to our place, because we've just been. Then we see a first or second time visitor come up the sidewalk, and we have just 2 weeks ago, or a week ago, 3 weeks ago, we've been that
Yeah.
person.
No, that's good. That's really
Um,
good.
and that I've always thought that if I ever got to a place where I had, a staff like in some of the areas that you and I have served, that I would very much encourage them to do that, figure out some kind of rotation for that. Okay, so now I want to get to. So we've alluded to her. You've talked about her several times. Let's talk about Annie James Henderson.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. I'm about to go get her up out of this crib so you guys can see her.
Yeah, don't wake her up. Mindy will be upset. What's fatherhood like, man?
Oh, it's not even close to fair.
Yeah.
There's no words. It's hard for me because I feel like I've always been pretty in tune with my emotions, always able to emote and to clearly tell people how I feel, whether it's an uncomfortable feeling or always been just open about that sort of stuff. But the feeling of not even the actual, a lot of people have like stories about the birth story and those moments. And those were moments that I will never forget. I have snapshots in my brain and on my phone of those things. But it's been, I think it's been in the ordinary stuff in between. The
normal.
Yeah, because it's every day, and and I have this from words from people like you and from other just formative people in my life. If the only things you're really like clinging to are the first time they say dada or the first time they take a step, it's like you're gonna have so many gaps. And maybe I won't be able to hold all the memories of these regular Tuesday, at 6 p.m. and she does this thing, or just a normal Saturday morning where we get to sleep in and we're pushing her around the street. But I'm gonna try my hardest to just soak in what regular life is, because regular life with her is, it's the craziest thing I've ever experienced in my entire life. And, I can't imagine, like, some of the cliches are very much true. Like, I can't imagine a life without her. I can't imagine, the feelings of like intense love, the intense need to protect and to serve and all of this stuff paired with that you still get frustrated. Like when they get up in the middle of the night, you just want to be like, if you don't lay back down, I'm going to leave you outside.
So speaking of cliches, has earthly fatherhood parlayed into heavenly fatherhood, child of God at all yet, or no?
Yeah, no, that's something too. I feel like it probably aided in the health of our transition from church world to back to the secular and to wanting to find a church home and stuff like that, because the way that I felt basically instantaneously, and the way that I felt watching her figure things out. And she's figuring out, like the day she figured out how to walk or crawl or just sit up, or the day she, was holding a cup on her own, kind of a deal. And it's these elementary things, and the way that I think the things that I'm learning are complex, but the way that God probably watches me too. And he's like, he's getting it. He's doing the equivalent of pulling up now, like he's sitting up now without any help. And the idea of being so loved regardless, and the idea that when I fall short, it's so much less based in anger as much as it is, I just don't want you to hurt. It's him saying, like, my heart is broken because I don't want you to have felt that. Like when she does a thing,
protection versus punishment.
Exactly. And because that's so much of that I still like naturally assumed was when I did that thing, it made him angry, which not to say we don't make God, but I think we do leave out the part where he doesn't want us to feel that way. He doesn't want us to stumble and fall, and not to say there's no lesson to be learned from it or a thing to grow, but
Sure.
There's times where I'm like, I don't want her to do this because I don't want her to fall and hurt herself. And it hurts
Hmm.
me that she would want to do, and that sort of thing where there's
Yeah.
just been characters, like character and attributes of God that I previously could have told you, but I don't know if I could have. I don't know if I had felt them. I don't know if I don't want to say didn't believe
Hmm.
them, but I did not personally know them to be, true.
The
Yes. And
experience.
so now that I've
Yeah.
experienced it, I'm like, I can now say it and fully like
Hmm.
subscribe to the belief of this, because I feel like I've,
Yeah.
lived something that's allowed me to see that in a more tangible way.
So that sweet baby's one.
Yeah.
She turned one.
Yeah, I think she's right at 14 months, a little over 14 months. It's
Wow.
crazy.
Walking.
Yeah, walking,
How many teeth?
so freaking many. Like it's she's right now she's got her fingers in her mouth all day because she's just pushing on them, trying to push down, because I know it
Yeah.
it irritates her throughout the day. And but no, it's the craziest thing to see her smile now, and she's got, you know 4 or 5 on the top, 4 or 5 on the bottom. She's got stuff coming in the backs, and it's just every day is
Yeah.
something truly like just completely new.
What's her personality
She's
like? How
she's
is
as
she?
crazy as a hit dog. She's
She gets that from
Yeah,
her dad.
she gets it honest. From both of
Yeah.
us. She basically always has the zoomies, man. She's If she is awake right now, she's definitely in a season where she does not want to be held. She wants to be on the
Hmm.
ground. She wants to be moving. And she's just always exploring. She's always opening up her book. She's always looking under this thing, picking this up, finding any loose dog hair or somehow shard of glass on the ground and bringing it to me
Sure.
before she tries to eat it. And she is absolutely in everything at all times. And it is somehow both the most frustrating thing and the sweetest. Like, as I'm sitting here tonight, I get home immediately, start boiling water to make noodles. I'm going to do spaghetti, and the entire time she is just wiling out, just opening up
Hmm.
because I haven't put cabinet locks on. She's just opening up every single cabinet door, looking at me, and then slamming them, and then handing me books to read to her. And
Yeah.
it's a absolute beautiful mess.
She's a happy baby, though, right? I mean, she
Yeah,
is
no,
a
we
sweet, happy
we got
baby.
very, very fortunate. Mindy was so incredibly intentional, and I'll never probably be able to express my gratitude for that, because I'm sure I won't ever even notice the scope of what she did, and just her gifting and intentionality towards um, starting Annie early on, like schedules and things like that, like this book Moms on Call, which she's bought for plenty of people and just giving it to them. She's like, you don't have to do it. I'm not
Hmm.
saying it's 100%, but we did it, and it's awesome. And it has less to do with Moms on Call and more about Mindy's desire to approach anything with thought beforehand. Um,
Hmm. Hmm.
where I have that for some things, but I'm also very much like a winger when it comes to some other things. And not to say I would
Yeah.
have done it, but like her level of intentionality has changed our lives, I think, for the better. I do believe.
We got to get
No,
her on
we
here.
will. Yeah, we
We
will.
we have to do a Mindy Henderson episode. We just
Yeah,
got to at
no,
some
we
point.
really do, because
We
she's
must.
something else. And I do believe Annie has responded super well to it, where I think you could apply exactly what we did to another child and it might not happen the same, or for somebody else it might even be way
Mhm.
better. But she's always been super happy go lucky. Has slept through the night since she was 7 or 8 weeks old, eats at the same
Wow.
time, naps at the same time, plays, and when she wants something, she is quick to let you know. But
Hmm.
in Mindy's level of preparedness and just wanting Annie to be set up for success, it's made
Hmm.
everything that was already going to be, because it's still hard. It doesn't matter if your baby sleeps through the
Hmm.
night. That's not the hardest part of the day, anyways. Like, there's plenty
Yeah.
of things that will still be difficult. Um,
Yeah.
but she has set both Annie and us up for success in so many ways. That it just makes sometimes where I believe where people are so burnt out, whether it's on just all the stuff, how busy life can get, that sometimes they don't get to slow down and enjoy a Wednesday night meal. They don't get to enjoy what we got to enjoy, and it's not because they're not working super hard. It's not because they don't want it, but it's, I think, from just what she was able and willing to do, it's afforded us some time to be able to slow down and get to enjoy those moments and things like that. So it's been just super sweet to kind of see that and to just truly just learn from Annie every day, because she's something else.
Yeah. Well, I have observed both in person and from afar, and you and Mindy are killing the game. Y'all are. You are an incredible husband, and an equally incredible father, and it makes me proud. It's interesting. We talked on another podcast that our relationship it's been so many things. It's been best friends. It's been mentor mentee. It's been spiritual brothers. It's been there's been a strand of older brother, younger brother, father like figure. There's just been all these different parts and pieces to our relationship. And not to get too sappy, man, but I'm so proud of you. I'm proud of you and Mindy. And you make me proud.
Thanks, brother.
Yeah. So, all right. I think we ought to wrap it up. I don't even know what our time count is. So there's not going to be an entrance or an exit to these things. It's sticking to that. No post-production, no editing, no intro stuff. So if you're listening to this, if you saw it, if you've made it this far, or watched us in segments incrementally, please subscribe. Is that right?
Heck
subscribe, like, follow. If you could give us a review, that's one thing that I've seen as I've kind of checked out other podcasts. If you take a few moments and give us a review, if it's honest and real, good or bad, if you'd take a moment and do that, before we head out. So this episode's going to be, what's that thing, 114, 113. The next one, I don't even know who I'm interviewing next, but it might be 20 minutes. I'm not sure, but you'll see that in the posts. One thing that I've learned, so you've inspired me, you and Jared Rodenizer. I need to get Jared Rodenizer on here to get active. And one thing I've learned in my walks, because we're walking every day, and I can put an earbud in, pull up a podcast, and the episode link doesn't really matter. If I get back, all I got to do is the next day just pick right back up. And so we're going to be much less structured. There will be no structure, really. So one episode may be an hour and 15 minutes. One might be 20 minutes if we interview a real dud. So, so that's the Keep It Simple podcast. So before you go, this is stealing a page from Annie F. Downs. She ends, who I love to listen to that podcast. She ends every episode with, what sounds fun to you? And so imitation is the highest form of flattery and compliment. And so we've just learned that you're taking control of your physical health, that you have changed jobs, found a new church, working full time, being an excellent husband and father. So my question is, how do you keep it simple? What's the number one way you keep it simple?
It's a great question. Keeping it simple.
Mm-hmm.
Man, I think for me, even though I do believe that I do a poor job of it a lot of times, maybe my inner critic says I do it wrong more than I do it right, and I don't prioritize it, but I truly believe that it is just slowing down and noticing. slowing down and looking around, slowing down and saying the thing to the person. It's slowing down. It's slowing down because it has been an incredible season of transition, incredibly fruitful, but incredibly trying, incredibly difficult, incredibly all of the, lees.
Mm-hmm.
But the sweetest times have been both in the mundane and the highs and the lows, but it is when I'm able to just slow down and to notice a thing. It is to slow down in the middle of cooking spaghetti, which I know has to get done, and just pay attention for a second to what Annie's doing. It's in the middle of knowing that I've got somewhere to be in about an hour, but Mindy's on the couch and I could sit there and ask her how something went, and it's just the, intentionally slowing down whatever you got going on and giving it just the smallest iota of effort, and to realize that is, sometimes that's enough.
Perfect. I love you. I will talk to you soon. Thank you for being the guinea pig and episode 1. We're going gangbusters.
Let's go, dude.